When it comes to SUVs, you wouldn't say Ford is a master of them in Europe. The Cougar, the Ford Focus-sized one, was brilliant when it launched, but a new third-generation one can't come soon enough. Then there was the all-American Edge, which proved to be too much of a yank tank and was quietly withdrawn from sale. Of course you'll cry, how about the EcoSport? Yes, but whilst it's half decent now, it's had as many facelifts as Share. So for its new smallest SUV, Ford has raided its history books and decided to bring back the Puma. Now purists will shout, it's an SUV, it's not a coupe. But this is the point. Now, coupes aren't selling at the moment, and funnily enough, SUVs are the hot property at the moment. That said, Ford hasn't just stuck the Puma name on just a dull SUV. See those high-set headlights and that bubble-shaped roof? That's pure Puma from the 90s. And overall, it's good looking. Yes, you might hate Ford for making an SUV, but you can't blame them for making a car that will actually sell. Underneath the controversial body, it's all very ordinary though, because the Puma is based on the Fiesta. So what we've got here is a controversial looking car with a famous name, and it's based on the humdrum Ford Fiesta. Now from launch there are only two engines available. There's a 1-litre 3-cylinder turbo with 123 brake horsepower and another one with 152 brake horsepower. And if you really want a diesel, there'll be one arriving along a little bit later. But these new 1-litre EcoBoost engines aren't the engines that you currently find in the Fiesta, because mild hybrid technology has arrived at Ford. Now, mild hybrid, so what does that mean? Well, you don't plug it in, and it's not a full hybrid like a Toyota Prius. What it simply means is that there's a fancy generator in this car that stores the energy lost during coasting, during braking, and stores that energy into a little battery. And when you're accelerating away from a tight little corner like we are now, an extra 50 Newton meters of torque is thrust into the engine and gives you an extra bit of boost. It works really very nicely actually, and it just gives you a nice little extra bit of squirt when you're accelerating away from tight little corners, and it's totally unobtrusive. And yes, you can have the hybrid gauge in front of you telling you what the battery is doing, what the engine is doing, but really most people will be none the wiser. And Ford says there is a noticeable improvement in fuel economy and CO2 emissions. Now, there's nothing wrong with being based on the Fiesta because, as we well know, the Fiesta is the finest handling supermini money can buy. And by Ford just raising the ride height a little bit on this car hasn't adversely affected it, because if you drove this car blindfold, I would guess that 8 people out of 10 would say you're driving a Fiesta. You still get the super sharp, well-weighted steering. You still get this chassis that is just keen to turn in. I don't know what Ford is putting in their tea at the moment, but the way that they're able to engineer so much fluidity and excitement into what is, let's face it, a pretty humdrum platform and humdrum package really seems to be working. This car is way more fun to drive than it has a right to be, which is not particularly hard, I suppose, because the typical cars in this class are, let's face it, not particularly sporting to drive, and that's putting it quite politely. But you could say the Puma almost lives up to its namesake. Now that Fiesta feeling carries on in the inside as well, because it's pretty much the same interior that you find in the Supermini, albeit the dashboard is a little bit taller because, of course, the Puma is a bit of a taller car. Main differences? Well, on this Titanium X trim, we've got this wood detailing, which reminds me of something from a Ford Granada gear from 1982, but I mean that in a good way. You also get zippable seat covers as well, so if you spill something on them, you can easily fully wash them. You get massaging front seats as well, and there's a new display in front of you. It's a totally digital cockpit, and in time we'll see that added to the Fiesta as well. Other things, well, there's a drive mode selector, so you can choose between normal, eco, sport and a trail mode as well. We've got a wireless charging pad down there, and these door cards are a little bit different. The scratchy plastic is broken up with this fabric material here. Now in the back, despite that sloping roofline and the panoramic sunroof of this car, headroom isn't too bad. Knee room is particularly good as well, although you don't get the sliding rear seat bases that you get in a Citroen C3 Aircross, for example. But it's pretty decent amount of space back there. But the main thing about this car is to be found in the boot. Lift up the tailgate and the boot seems pretty normal and standard for this type of car. There's a movable boot floor, but a surprise lurks underneath. There's extra storage, but not any normal extra storage. Ford calls it a mega box, but really it's an 80-litre compartment that can hold everything from shopping to wetsuits. There's even a drainage hole in the bottom, so the mega box can be washed out. It's so large you can even carry a set of golf clubs upright in the boot. Click in the top right to see my video of how clever the boot actually is. So that boot makes the Puma rather clever, and the Fiesta underpinnings make the Puma way more fun to drive than a small SUV like this has a right to be. And the news keeps on getting better. With prices kicking off from £21,000, it seems good value. But when you realise a fully loaded one is around 23 grand, the Puma seems an absolute bargain. Some people would never be able to get over the decision to call an SUV a Puma, but this car isn't aimed at purists. It's for families who find the Seat Arona too dull and the Nissan Juke too ugly. And everyone else, it's just a really good car.